So we can do a breakdown of Charlie Denis' work. Surname could be Denis, but I'm going to go with Denis. I've got 5 setups that we're going to work through, and we're doing all of this with constant lighting. Let's just take a look at some of his work now. Has a classic old school Hollywood vibe, or like 1970s kind of advertising style, maybe some 80s feel also. Obviously working a lot with Nadia Lee Cohen. I'm not quite sure where his or her style ends and the other person starts, but I think that makes it interesting to look at. There's a couple of key characteristics of really strong front face lighting and a strong clip lighting, and I'll teach you how to do those things. But the thing that's really great about this is it's really simple to do. There's nothing really technical in terms of like modifiers and things that you need to worry about. So then you can concentrate on making the actual images you want. Also this lighting, because it is quite intense, quite high contrast, a lot of highlights, works really well on raw skin and skin that's like super tanned and moisturized and so on. So this is a good skill to have in your like portfolio. And so we're going to work through the studio setup, and hopefully you'll follow it through to the end, because it gets a little bit more advanced in the final setup, and it will give you a good sense of how you can also play with small elements of set design without making it too complicated. This was a viewer request, so if you do have requests, just drop them in the comments and I do see them all. And thanks so much to everyone that supported on the last video. I really genuinely appreciate that. There's lots of different constant lighting you can use. I've set this up with Arri Lighting, but obviously you could use Aperture. There's a lot of smaller brands out there that you could also work with now. I love Aperture. Aperture LED lighting is really great. You can run it off a simple power supply, but obviously if you've got the budget, getting Arris is great. But as always, don't worry too much about the kit. It's the principle that we're looking at. And this is a fun one to do, so hopefully everyone enjoys this, and let's jump into it. So let's look at the studio space. It's about 10 meters wide, 5 meters high, 6 meters long, just a nice big editorial space, but we're not going to use the whole of the room. Let's just focus on the reference image to see what we want to really look out for and try and build up in our lighting. So we know we've got that strong front light. Let's work with that first. I'm on a 35mm lens, so I'm fairly wide, ISO 400, f11, and the shutter speed of 125. So the shutter speed is important this time because we're working with constant lighting, not for strobe lighting. Look around the space. We've just got our basic set. I've got a rough idea for the models posing. I'm not going to try and replicate everything in the picture, it would just take too long. So you might notice little bits of light kind of bleed through in certain places where it doesn't in the original image, but that's fine. And then we're going to start with our key light, which is an Arri M40, and we have 2 others in the range that we could work with. And let's zoom out, see the distance. We've kind of got the light about the same distance from the models as the models are from the background. And the light is at 63, so it's just a little bit over half power. We're also using barn doors. So you see we've got the barn doors on the front of the fixture here, and this is just how it would be normally as well. Take off the barn doors completely, and then the whole scene sort of floods with light. Even though the light is only just a bit over half power, you can see there's a lot of spill light, we're getting bounce light, we're hitting light onto the backdrop, which we don't really want, that's not super controllable. So the barn doors really allow us to control that light and just put those back on again. Let's just look at an example of that. If we take the bottom barn door right now, what I'm doing is I'm clipping the edge of the bed. So there's a kind of fall off of light through the imagery. There's not a huge amount of light hitting that front mattress. But if I just bring that down, if you see in the preview image, it gets quite hot. So a lot of light is hitting that leading edge. Barn doors, super controllable. If you don't have great barn doors, or maybe one of them's broken, you could use like cinefoil also. That would be quite good to like shape the light. And you can use that as a flag, and you can cone light and make sort of snoots and so on with that. Super simple, really easy to work with. So the things to look out for, what is that main light doing? It's shaping the face. We know that it's angled down, so it's going to bring out that kind of cheekbone highlight, but also it's going to exaggerate that feeling of light and shade. So we're really kind of contouring the face as we would also do with makeup, putting that heavy shadow under the chin. I've got an orange warming gel on here. In the reference image, the models are like super tanned. Some of that's maybe post-production or makeup, but it could also be that like film emulsion or the digital LUT that someone's applied. So I'm going to start with a gel light. Just a half CT orange, so it's just warming. And I know I can take that off or cool it down if I need to later, if everything else gets a little bit too warm once I've added other lights in. Look at that from the side. It's above head height. It's quite a big light source, so I'm fairly far away, and I'm just pushing directly down towards the main model. We're not allowing a lot of light spread within the frame. And it's great as our starting point. Then we're going to introduce that clip light, which we can see on the model's shoulder, and it's pushing past the hair as well. So super easy to do that. I've got the same lighting set up, so I've got another M40. If we look at it from above, it's pretty much the same distance away from the model as the main light is. Rather than having it on 60, I've got it on 85. So I've got another kind of quarter amount of power basically in this clip light, and that's already set up as a solo light. It's doing 2 things, and you could do this with 2 separate lights. that's your choice. But I've got a big light source, so I'm going to use this to do two things. So I'm going to use it to throw light onto the background model, but I'm also going to use it to control the clip light and to shape the foreground model. I've got a warming gel on here, so I've got a half CT orange. Again, I'm just matching the front and the back. I might be able to change it later if I want to. If I want to have the clip light be more pronounced and seem to come forward more. So with the solar light, you can see what it's doing. It's putting an awkward shadow on the background model, but that's fine because we're going to knock that back with another light later. And it's just shaping the form of the foreground model. Take it off solar light so we can see them both together. And like I said, this whole setup is super easy. Nothing complicated about this style of lighting at all. A little bit of light is falling onto the mattress, the bedspread, so on. You can see that in the reference image, but again, it's controllable. You could also put some other flags in place if you want to, just control that light, or you can control it with the barn doors. So we're just allowing a thin area of light to come through onto the frame, and it works totally fine. Now what we need to do is add some kind of shaping light. I've taken the clip light out so we can see exactly where we are. Let's look from the top so we get a rough idea of the distance. So about half the distance from the model of the main light, I've now got this shaping light. This is our kind of fill light towards the face. And let's also look at the height of that. Fairly similar height now, and pretty much a similar angle. I don't want the two lights to work against each other. So I've got that main light coming into the model's face, and then that fill light that's coming slightly from the side, a little bit more directional, but I want it to look almost like it's one light source. Let's put it as a solar light and we can watch the preview image. So obviously on its own, be really heavy in the shadows, eye sockets, it's far too contrasty. It's putting the heavy shadow under the neck, but when we take it off as solo, that all begins to sit together. They are very strong shadows in the reference image because this is not subtle form of lighting. And I've got it at 55 power. I could bring it back in terms of its distance and put it kind of in line with the key light if I wanted to, and then I would just put the power up closer to say 65. But for now, this is fine. And then also, just to look with this, I'll put it on the solo again. You can see that a little of this light is hitting the model in the background. So we're sort of pushing across the jawline, cheekbone, face. It's just helping even out that exposure. I could put a bit more power in that if I wanted to, or I could open up the barn door again on that side so it's hitting the model's face more. And let's look at those three images together. So first of all, check the key light. We've got that little bit of spill on the background, but we control that if we need to. We've got the heavy shadow under the chin, and it's a little underexposed, but we're shaping the face at this point. We could put more power into that main light if we wanted to. Now add it with the clip light. So the main light into the model's face, then just the clip light on its own. Then we've got this main light into the model's face, and then the shaping light that's coming across from the side. Note in this one, there is no clip light. The clip light is turned off. We're going to add all those things back on in a minute, but it's just useful to see what those three elements are doing. Go back to our setup. Now what I want to do is just add those highlights that are into the hair, shape the face of the second model in the background, just add little points of interest and not make it quite so harsh in terms of its lighting. So really, really basic, simple process that I'm going to do here is I'm just going to add a cross lighting. Because these are in close, I can go with a smaller light setup. So again, this might be like cheaper to rent. You could have another big powerful light here and just pull it back or turn it down if you want to. But again, if we're thinking of like, how do you replicate this in the real world and try and save money, get some big expensive lights and get some cheaper lights. And then you can kind of accent the frame a little bit with those cheaper lights. It's normally how you would kind of work with a production. Because it's a smaller light, I've got it pretty much on full power. I've got a barn door on here, so half CT blue. So I'm just using that more as a highlight kind of light. And I'm playing it off against the warmth of the first light that's coming in. And then from this side, I've got a small amount of CT orange on here. So I think it's, an eighth. And that's just allowing us to kind of warm the light a little bit so it doesn't look too separate from the main light that's hitting the model in the foreground. Remember always, we want to decide like, are we playing lights off against each other or are we working them in harmony with each other? So let's put them as solar lights individually. Let's take the blue one first. Again, you can see we're just pushing across the face. We're thinking about cheekbone, face structure, and we're also thinking about defining shape and form. If you see what it's like when we take the barn door off, so let's just click this here. See how the barn door is super helpful for us now. It's controlling the light on the background, the foreground, like the bed sheet mattress area, that would really come forward, but we can control that with the barn door and just really stop light hitting that area. Barn door is super helpful. And then let's put the other light as a solar light. Now this one, obviously we're pulling the background model's face forward more. So we're using this to really emphasize face structure, give some shape to the face, and we're also allowing it to hit the foreground model. We know the bulk of our light is coming from straight on in front, so it's not going to suddenly change the shape of the face of the foreground model. Now the other thing that we want to check is again, is put our big clip light in the back. So what I've done with this big clip light now is I've put a blue gel on here. So I think I had half CT orange before. Now I want to play it off against the front light a little, so I want that highlight to come forward. And so I've got it as a half CT blue, and that blue will just allow us to kind of have that highlight come forward a little bit more, also work with the hair color. And again, this is where like don't focus too much on what the simulation is doing. It's the principle that we're trying to kind of work with here. So sometimes you want to tone your highlights back, sometimes you want them to come forward, sometimes you want to play warm against cold. Very like simple basic things. And let's look at what our base is again. So we've got, let's put this as solo, that main light is pulling out the kind of face structure. Then we've got that fill light that's defining the shape of the face a bit, but it's also just kind of softening the shadows. It's not allowing such a harsh nose shadow, for example. Then we've got these two lights that are pushing in from the sides, working against each other, but they're both just helping that shape come forward. Then we've got that simple clip light from the back. Let's just see that again. We're using that clip light to hit the background model and also the hairline. The other thing we can do, let me just show you a version of this with the polyboards in. So obviously the barn doors are super controllable. We know that, and that's really helpful for us. We could also use polyboards, and that polyboards here, just showing a basic example of this, it's helping to kind of stop some of that light hitting the backdrop. In the reference image, the backdrop is quite dark. Again, some of that could be post-production, and some of it could just be controlling the spill of the light. And you could use polyboards to help with something like that. It's also then a little bit about what distance your light is from the model and how far the model is from the background. And we'll look at that in one of the later setups that I worked through. And then let's just look at a final version of this. So I've taken those polyboards out. I've made some adjustments now in terms of my shutter speed, and I've kept the other camera settings the same. So what have I done with the shutter speed here? Instead of 125, I've gone to 2/50th of a second. And let's just compare those two images so you can see the difference. So this is with the shutter speed at 125, and then the one on the right is with the shutter speed at 2/50th of a second. It makes quite a bit of difference with that. We get a feeling it's more contrasty. Obviously, the overall exposure is darker. The background is a little bit darker. It allows us, if I wanted to kind of bring the model's face forward a bit more. I could put more power in those lights. But the quick way to do that is obviously just to change that shutter speed. And because we're using constant lighting, that's going to make a big difference on how we actually view the final image. And let's look at this, just the final one on its own. So the things to kind of be aware of is, what are we doing with kind of extra shadows? Does it become messy with the extra shadows? How do we control some of those shadows? So we've still got this heavy shadow under the chin in the reference image. We've got this kind of fairly heavy eye socket. That's all fine. We're shaping the face in the main model. That's also good. And then we've got this fall off from light to shade down across the bottom of the image. And then again, we've got this kind of nice highlight that's coming across the background model's face and pushing down the cheekbone, shaping the face. We could throw a little bit more light into the body, so that could be a case of adding another light if we wanted to, opening up the barn doors, or just kind of shifting position of the light or the model. So it's just kind of really tweaking things then, but we've got the basics that we need to know how we can control the space and the lighting. And we've got that fairly controllable background. So if we just look at that again from the top, you see we're not using the whole space. That's fine. But we've got these like 3 big lights and then these 2 smaller lights that are going to push in. So to show that we can kind of then repeat this, and once we understand that real simple approach of a key light to the face, a clip light, and then some kind of fill light, you'll see it repeated over and over again in this work. So we can take this basic setup and make this image now. And again, with that reference image, let's just look at what we've got to work with. We've got that clip light that's coming from the back. We've got some other clip light that's coming from the side or the front. It's quite high contrast. We know that. We can see that kind of from the sheen also on the skin, and also the fairly heavy shadows that we're seeing. We've got this direct light source that's coming across the face, and we can see that again by that hard edge shadow that's kind of pushing down the jawline and under the chin, bringing the face forward. Super contrasty light that's pushing into the face, and we can see that also from the highlights that are on the skin. And some of this will be makeup, obviously, that's bringing that forward, but a lot of that is that quality of light. Again, this clip light that's pushing past the shoulder, putting a hard edge line here. So with this setup, I'm going to start with pretty much everything in the same place. And this is why once you know how to work with the lighting like this, it becomes super easy, because it's the same thing repeated over and over again. I'll take you through it individually, but we can look at the principle here. Strong clip light, front light to the face, front light to the face, shaping light, and a shaping light. And these are our kind of accent lights or clip lights again. And one of these is our key and one of these is our fill. If we take them separately, we know that we want to pull that face forward and bring that kind of face structure. So let's just do that with this first setup, one by one. I've got that main light from the front. I've got it the same power as I had it before. I've got the barn doors on it. Let's take the barn doors on and off and watch the preview image. You can see it's throwing light into the background. And let's look at what that key light gives us. Got that heavy shadow under the chin. The key light is pretty much the same position as it was in the first setup. So we're lighting from above, shaping the face as we always do, contouring. It's giving us this really contrasty light on the neckline and the chest and the shoulders. And we can bring that forward obviously with makeup. Got that kind of fairly heavy deep set eye socket, and then we just know that we can even that out with a bit of a fill light. But let's look at the clip light also. So look at it from above. Again, same thing as we had before. We've got our clip light pretty much the same distance as the main light is from the model. So our clip light now, I've got it at 100%, and I've got a half CT orange. It's quite a warm clip light in the reference image. That could again just be the hair that's kind of throwing that off, but it looks fairly warm light. So I'm going to do the same. And then I've got the barn doors, put them back on, close them down, and we've got a nice controllable image. It's also worth just pointing out now at this point, let's just take this clip light. If we watch the preview image here, we can just kind of drag this clip light. As long as we stay like in a circle around the model, we can just keep moving this clip light around, and we'll get the similar kind of effect, as long as we're not moving the distance too much from the main model. So you can really control what you want to do with that. Compare the two images. So this is our key light and a key light with a clip. Doing something nice on the shoulder, that's also fine. It's just adding shape and form. Now let's put in our fill light, and let's look from this side. So the difference is, let's just jump between those two so you can see what I've done. The main light I've taken out and the clip light I've taken out. So now we're just working on a kind of a fill and a clip from the other side. This one is going towards the face. Let's put it on the solo. You can see that we're just filling in the face from one side. Strong heavy shadow, but we know we're going to push that out with our main light. Look at the height of that. We're above head height, angling down, always more flattering. And I've got half CT orange because we're kind of matching that light that's coming from the front when we put that back in. Then I've got these two clip lights. I've got no gel on this one and no gel on this one. They're smaller lights, so they're 100%. Let's put them as solos. Check that preview image. And this is just shaping, allowing an area of interest to the highlight and the hair. So that's useful. And then the second one here is a bit more of a fill that's pushing in towards the face, and then also just kind of shaping the arm again. So with that as a solo light, let's just take this light off and let's just have these two lights on their own. Directional lighting. It looks really shadowy from the preview image, but it's totally fine because we know we're going to knock everything back out when we put the lights back from the other side. And let's just review those images. So we've got the final setup here. So let's go with our key light, key and clip, fill light from one side, and then our final setup that's here. If we look to our reference image, tonally we could change things a little bit. Yes, we could work with like white balance, or we can work with just getting that kind of cooler tone for the background and warmer for the skin that he's got. Again, a lot of that will come in terms of good post-production. So let's take another one of the reference images, this one here. Let's just do the quick breakdown so we know what we're looking at. Again, once you figure out what's happening, super easy, and you see it every time. We've got this cross lighting. So we've got this strong light that's coming down to the face, pushing that heavy shadow under the chin. Fairly defined edge here, so we know it's not super soft lighting. Contouring the face, bringing out the shape of the cheekbones. Fairly heavy shadow towards the kind of eye socket, but also don't get distracted by that too much because it's fairly heavy eye makeup. Again, that's also something to note. It's sort of vampy eye makeup that's working here. Then we got that clip light, really strong this time, pushing across the hair. All you're trying to do is kind of give some idea of lighting texture. So you're looking here and you're kind of looking across here. It's just helping defining shape and giving that like 3D form. Multiple light sources, quite contrasty, fairly heavy shadow under the hairline, really heavy shadow under the jewelry, so we can see that's got a definite edge to it. So again, we know it's a high contrast light. We can see it's putting hot spots in the T-zone, so we know it's not a soft light. Should be fairly easy to replicate this, working on our basic setup. And let's look at what we've got with this. I've got less lights to do this. I think it's fairly simple. The model was stood really far from the background, but that's really only just because I wanted to just replicate everything in the same space now and not move too many things around. You could have the model much closer to the background now. You could throw up like a black drape, black curtain, black polyboards, but you could also shoot on a white backdrop here and move them further away. Because we've got cross lighting, we just have to be careful we're not throwing too much direct lighting onto the backdrop. You could also just do this with some flags. So I've put some flags in here, and just things that we've already learned will kind of make things easier for us. So I could have some black material drape on the floor. It's going to be great. It's going to stop some of that bounce light and just make things a little bit sort of more contoured. Again, I've got a polyboard here. This one is just really stopping the spill going onto the background. And then I've got this polyboard doing the same thing. But again, I've got barn doors on all of the lights because I want to control where that light is going. So I'm going to keep those drapes and things in, and we're just going to set our key light. And again, our key light obviously going slightly from above. I've got the same power I've had the whole time, and I've got a half CT orange. My key light doesn't really ever need to change in any of these setups. And let's look at that as just the key. So this is doing all the things that we could look at from our reference image. Let's just bring that over. Again, the exact positioning of shadows, we can worry about that when we've got our model in. But we've got this strong shadow that's coming under the chin, strong shadow that's coming under the chin. This one is probably a little bit more top down. Introduce that here if we wanted to, but it would look a little bit strange on this artificial model's face. And obviously the hair is a little different as well. Don't get too distracted by that. The principle is always what we're looking at. These kind of hot zones that we've got, this sort of T-zone light that we would have, which we've got in the reference image, all of that is working nicely for us. Then we've got our fill light, and our fill light is going to be really, really simple from this one. I'm going to just push it almost straight from the front. So let's just put it as a solo light. So I've gone from a half CT to a full CT. The reference image, again, just bring it in. It's quite warm. Could be skin tone, could be post-production, could be gel lights. So we're going with gel lights because it's easier to do some of this in camera. Again, as always with gels, be careful how much color you introduce to an image. It's harder to take it out later. Actually, let's just look at it on the solo light. So we see this soft shadow under the jawline, nice little highlight on the cheeks, but we know our main light, key light, is quite strong anyway. So let's take that off solo now. And you can see that that key light is knocking out a lot of that. And again, in terms of power, I've got a smaller light source and I've got it really close, so I'm like just under half power. Again, with barn doors on, put this as a solo light. Let's take the barn doors on and off. You see how we're controlling that right-hand side of the image. That's really important there. See that fall off onto shadow. Those barn doors are really helping us control and shape the face. Then the other thing I've done also with this, we could go higher with this key light. Let's look at this here as a solo. And I'm just bringing out the shape of the face a little bit more. Let's look at those two side by side. So on the left-hand side, we have the key light where it's a little bit lower. And then on the right-hand side, I've got the key light. So it's a little bit more angled down. So we're kind of pushing top down a little bit more here. This one, we're just shaping the face a little bit more. Let's bring our reference image back in. And suddenly we're getting closer, right? So we've got this top-down light here. It's a little hot here, but again, don't worry, it's a virtual simulation. So we would get that right when we're kind of working with it, the final model. But it's putting that nice little shadow under the lip line, which we've got here, little highlights on the chin. Just pushing this shadow across. We're warming our shadow up a little bit, which you see there's kind of a little warmth to it here. This fill light is coming slightly from the side, but we're pushing in a little bit more from the front. Just all controllable things. Now let's compare a cool fill and a warm fill. In these two images, let's look at this one here. All I've done is I've put a half CT blue on. So I did have a full CT orange because it's really useful to see now the difference. An area that we really want to look at is what's happening here, this shadow under the chin, the shadow under the chin here. Remember when we looked at gels before, gels are very much about coloring the shadow area. So with this one, we are warming that shadow up. And then with the half CT blue, we're cooling that shadow back down. Again, just personal preference, what you want to do with this, where you want your shadows to kind of come forward or not. You can do a lot of shadow toning in post-production, but again, it's always helpful to get that basic done in camera. Then the other thing we want to do is just add our clip light. So let's put our clip lights here. Let's look at them one by one. Take our backlight first of all. So I've got half CT orange. I've got my big light with the barn doors on it. And then we're pushing really far forward and direct. And we're just putting that highlight down the hairline and across the shoulder. Then we've got this other fill light from this side. And this is not in the original reference image, but I just like to put it in here because evening things out a little bit. I think it's a little bit more controllable for the image that I'm actually showing. And it's just giving a little bit more definition onto one side of the face. So let's just bring them all back in again and look at it from the top. Super controllable. Got our key light, got our fill light, clip light, and a clip light. And again, if we look at them in stages, we've got our final light with all the flags in, got our key light towards the face, key light with a warm fill, key light with a cool fill, and then we've got our clip light. Look at the final image on its own. Again, we've got options with this. We could put the shutter speed at 2/50th rather than 1/25. Let's just do that now so we can see if everything sits back a little bit and that background becomes a little bit more controllable. Compare those two. So we've got the final flag set up, and then our final flag with our shutter speed at 2/50th of a second. Bring the reference image in. This one is probably closer. The image is a little cooler for the reference image. Again, we could do that in post if we wanted to, or with our white balance as we're shooting, or with our gels. The highlight is a little bit stronger in here, but it's the same principle, that clip light coming across the back, bringing that shutter speed to control the background and get that kind of overall feeling contrast into the image is a lot better than if we were shooting at 1/25. So next we're going to look at one of the SKIMS shoots. Exactly the same principle, and it's super basic, but the approach is slightly different. So this is our reference image. Now we know we've got cross lighting because we can see the shadow So obviously across here and across here, we've got clip lighting. We can see that down one side. We can see that there's some kind of clip lighting from the top, it looks like, and also pushing across the body. Obviously, there's a lot of moisturizer makeup product that's making the skin really gleam and shine here, but we know we're putting contrasty light onto the body, and it just naturally looks good, especially on darker skin tones. We've got that heavy shadow here, right? So we've got a hard edge to that shadow, no soft lighting here. We've got contrasty shape across the arm, super strong highlights, heavy shadow under the chin. So taking the basics of what we've already learned, we're still in the same studio, obviously. This is our basic setup, but I'm just leaving everything where it is because the camera's always staying the same and the model position is staying the same, just so we can kind of keep our flow going in this process. Let's look at what we've got of our front lights, our clip light, and then a clip light from the top. This one on the side, I guess, is probably a little bit more of a fill light rather than a clip, but we'll see it all separately in stages. With aperture on this one, I've gone for f8 because I have this background that's quite close. I don't want to shoot like super sharp on this one, but f8 is still totally fine for what we need to do. And the things that we look at to change here is, let's look at the distance of these two lights. So our main lights that are coming from the front. So I've got them at a medium distance here, big powerful lights almost on full power. And then I've got them really far away here at the kind of edge of my set on full power again. And the thing that we want to look at is the defining edge of the shadow. So let's see it as a medium and as a far away. Don't worry too much about the exposure difference on the carpet because there is a little bit of exposure change here, but we're looking at this hard edge to the shadow. Slightly soft edge to the shadow, slightly harder edge to the shadow. That's just because I've pulled that light really far back. So the further the light is away from someone, the more hard edge defined shadow you're going to get. In the same way as if you think of, it's a super sunny day, the sun is obviously really far from us. And if there's no like cloud cover, no diffusion in the sky, we get those really hard edge shadows. The distance of your light source to the model or the subject you're photographing is really important. But just to show you that the reference image has quite hard edge shadow also. So it's a little bit more realistic, the one that I've got here where the light is really far away. That may not be feasible though in the setup that you've got. Now let's just look at what we're doing to front lights only. I'll keep my light position so that they're really at the edges of the set. So they're a good 6 or 7 meters away from the model, I think, at this point. Image with all of the lights on. This is the image with just those two lights. So you can really see those two lights are doing a huge amount of the work. They're defining the shape. They are doing a lot of the contour. They're adding all that kind of glistening highlight onto the body. And because we're shooting across the body and we've got that cross lighting, that kind of Nadia Lee lighting that we've talked about in other videos as well. Super simple, super basic, but it allows you a great amount of coverage. You'll get this weird angular shadow under the chin. But if you're okay with that, this is a good way to kind of just get a really basic lighting that's going to work for you. But again, this is a high powered light, it's a big light, so I could bring that light closer and have a smaller light source would also work, which I'll show you in a minute. I've got the barn doors on, solo light from one side, solo light from the other side. There's a slight difference in the shadows on the reference image. One is slightly more defined than the other, so these lights are not kind of in perfect symmetry. Big lights really far away, a lot of coverage. Now let's work on our clip light. Let's take them one by one. I've got a strong clip light from the side. I put it as a solo light. See it this way, it's a little easier to view. So this light is obviously just pushing down across the frame. And we can see in the preview image, I've got a warm gel, I think, on here. Yeah, full CT orange. I'm really toning that highlight and I'm just pushing light across the body. Doesn't matter about the kind of ugly shadow it's making because I'm knocking that all out with the front light. Then I've got this light from the top. Let's put this as a solo. I've got a slightly warming gel on here, so like a half CT orange. And again, if you look at the preview image, I'm just doing a little kind of clipping light on the top shoulder. It's coming across to the bra strap and the chest, and then there's a little bit of a highlight on the head. Look at the reference image, we've got this little highlight that's creeping in here and here. You could get away with smaller lights for this, and you could bring those lights a little bit closer. Also, it's a lot more easy to control those clip lights once you've got that big light source from the distance. And then the final clip light, let's push it here. I'm just warming things up now. I've got a full CT orange. It's a little bit more flat, this light, just pushing into the body. Because I've got kind of all that highlight coming across from the other clip lights, I can afford this one to just be a little bit more toned and just pushing into the body. It doesn't need to be like super directional. Put them all back on. So let's look at a preview image of that. These are all the clip lights together. So the top clip light, side clip light, top clip light on the shoulder, and then this kind of punching in fill light from one side. But again, just remember what we have with front lights only. If you think this, we're just kind of layering this onto what we've already got here. So we're just getting more areas to accent and highlight. And now there's other ways of doing this also. So let's also have a look at what happens when we vary that distance. So I've got the lights at a medium distance away from the model, and I've got them close to the model, and then also I've got them far away from the model. Let's look at those three here. So we've got far, medium, and really close. This is the close version, medium, and then this is far away distance. There's a slight difference in terms of the exposure here. I could turn this down obviously a little bit. It's a little bit more centered on the model right now than it is in the other versions, but it's also a softer shadow line. It's not so hard and defined edge. The further away we are, which is this version, we're getting this more hard defined edge. Again, you can control those things a little bit, whether you have a flood or a spot and what you're doing with barn doors, and if you have any kind of fill light or any kind of polyboards. And this is a kind of extreme version of it now. So I've got the front light only here, which is really far away. And then I've got the front light only here, it's really close. Compare those two. So really far away, medium light source, really close, small light source. I've exaggerated this a little bit, because again, it's just useful to know. If you're doing lighting like this, or lighting like the reference image, the more powerful light you can get and the further away you can get it, the more controllable your image will be. And then the more you can kind of throw in additional lights and accent and highlight. This lighting is so simple. Think, okay, I want a big light source and I want it far away and I want to fire it at like 45 degrees to the model. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side and fire that 45 degrees to the model. Think of it like early Hollywood style of lighting. You want to be able to get coverage. Where with this closing light, any kind of change, light movement of posing the model makes, then the shadow is going to really kind of change. Let's look at the overall setup here. And again, just click through on them. I'll put them in solo lights and we can see there's a preview image on the right. A front light, 45 degrees to the model. Almost full power, up high, shaping the face, shaping the body. Do the same on the other side, solar light. Those two lights are kind of evening each other out, the balancing. Clip light accent across the top, clip light accent coming across the body, and then a bit of a fill light on this side. And that's it. You can replicate the SKIMS lighting. Really, really simple. The final one I'm going to show you is a bit more ambitious. So it may look a little confusing at first, but the principle is still the same. Strong clip light coming from the background. We can see that clip light here. We can see it hitting the foreground model. A strong contrasty light coming from the front. We can see that heavy shadow down here with a definite line and edge to it. It's not soft. Heavy shadow under the nose, definite line and edge to it. It's not soft. Same with the shadows under the lip there. Nothing soft about this. Old school Hollywood lighting. And let's see how quickly we can recreate that. So I've pushed everything back into our set, but if you look at it from the top, you can see the principle is still the same. We've just got to decide basically what is our key light and what are our clip lights, and then we can kind of go ahead and work with this. So just zoom around so you get a rough idea of the view of it, and let's go straight to our face light. We've got a barn door on. Let's take the barn door off, see the preview image. This is where barn door becomes super helpful. Take it off, you can see it kind of floods all of the image, hits the second model also, which we don't really want at this. I put the barn door on, and then suddenly it's just becoming about the model's face, shaping. I've got a warming gel, because the reference image is quite warm also. I've gone super angled, super high. I don't want to flatten anything off. Everything is quite sculpted and angular now. So with my fill light, I can come in and just having this as almost a supporting light. I've got this one up super high. I'm coming in a little bit more flat and a bit of a less extreme angle. Let's put this as a solo. We can see what this is doing. With this light, same as I did in the first setup, I'm hitting the foreground model and the background model. I've got a black drape on here. It's super easy for me to control with a black drape. If I took that out, you'd see the background goes a little bit more white. Solar light, we can see we're filling in, hitting the model's face and the body. Then what I want to do, so then I've got my accent light. I'm up super high on here. You could have a smaller light source and bring it a little bit closer. Again, you just have to control what you're doing with the barn doors. But it's nice with these big, powerful lights to kind of bring them back when possible if you do have that space. Let's put it as a solo. I'm glancing across the model's body, hitting the background model also with my light. And on the foreground model, it's just adding kind of shape and texture. Then what I want to do is add our cooler clip lights. We'll look at the reference image again. There's clip lights coming from the back. Super cool. So we can just throw these in really quickly. But this is a solo first of all. I've got a blue gel obviously on here because I'm cooling everything down. I'm using the barn doors to control the spread, pushing the light across the frame, hitting the background model a lot and hitting the foreground model kind of from behind because I know the rest of my light is going to even everything out. Then clip light from the other side. I'm just using this to just separate the background and the foreground model. Warming gel because I'm playing the two highlights off against each other. If you look at it from the side, we're just angling across. Might be easier to see from above actually with this one. Hitting from behind a little bit that background model. Nothing's hitting the foreground model. Take the barn doors off so you can see the spread of light here would be hitting the foreground model's legs. So what's it like when we put them all back in? Let's tilt it from above so it's super easy to see. Key light to the model's face. Bring the model's face forward. Our fill light that's pushing in towards the models. Put it as a solo so we can see it again. Remember what we're doing with that. Strong clip light from the back. Strong clip light from the back. And then a softer fill from the side. At those as separate so This is the overall image, key light to the face, key light with a bit of a fill, key light with our front side light coming in, and then this is just a clip light. And when we put it all together, we get something like this. The principles here are really easy and simple to follow. We've normally got a 45-degree light from the front on one side and 45-degree light from the other side, or we've got a strong angled light from the front that's hitting the model's face, and then we're filling in a little bit. Then we're putting a strong clip light in. We can recap these. So again, hope it was useful. It's great to work with something simple. If you borrow or rent 4 or 5 lights and have a day in a studio, you'll be able to master this lighting really quickly. It's relatively cheap to put together because you're not getting a bunch of softboxes and modifiers and anything complicated. And the lights themselves are pretty cheap to hire also. Then it's just about refining what you want the pictures to do, directing the models, and all the kind of more complicated and creative things that the photographer's actually doing. And it's great to see someone that's not overcomplicating things. Hopefully it was useful. Thanks for all the support, especially on the last video. It's really appreciated. If there's other photographers you want me to cover, then just drop their name in the comments and I will take a look. And thanks for watching as always.